So Anita, it's a pleasure to meet you. We're at the Eames Fine Art Gallery here in Bermondsey, and I'm just delighted to learn more about your exhibition. There's obviously a very natural affinity between the theme of climate change and water, but this is taking place in the context of COVID. So perhaps we can start with that and how this period of lockdown has produced this extraordinary resurgence in productivity from you.
Well, first of all, I wasn't able to see my grown-up children and grandchildren for the period of lockdown, 13, 14 weeks. And as I do quite a lot of childcare usually, I had more time. And I had more time alone, like everybody. And I think, like everybody, had more general anxiety and uneasiness generally. And I missed swimming. I missed swimming enormously. I was a pool swimmer. The pool's closed, and while I missed swimming during lockdown, I painted what I was missing, which is quite close to the heart of my work anyway. My work is mostly about what I would miss if things were taken away, if my lovely ordinary life was somehow taken away from me. And it was. And I was looking at people's photographs on Instagram who lived by lakes and rivers and sea and thinking, oh, I wish I didn't live in a big city. All I can do is walk and look at the river, but I can't swim. And I longed for swimming. I had all sorts of ideas, like getting a paddling pool in the studio garden and tying myself to the wall so I could have a swim and all sorts of things. Eventually, I found that the Royal Docks in London were open for open water swimming, and very tentatively went for a swim in the freezing Thames, which sounded like a terrible idea, but was just so glorious. I have a text message that I sent to my family virtually as soon as I got out of the water saying, "This is glorious, who wants to come with me? This is fantastic." And I've just become addicted. I've become addicted to swimming outside. And a lot of these paintings were done, some of these ones were done actually in Italy last summer. But the one over there with the reflections is the reflections of the buildings in the Royal Docks, because it's so beautiful. You're swimming along and there's these vertical striped buildings that are reflected in the water. And so the whole experience is so much more than swimming in a pool and just looking at a black line underneath you, but swimming with birds and the sky and the changing colours and the reflections of the buildings and the fresh air, and all of it has been so wonderful that I've wanted to celebrate it.
And indeed, I mean, the images of women swimming with such abandon, I mean, that's what made me stop in my tracks outside the gallery. Your works speak to me as a swimmer, as somebody who founded a campaign to ensure that girls around the world have the opportunity to learn to swim safely, develop it as a life skill, and benefit from all of its physical and mental healing properties. And as we know from so many surveys across the country, that not only has there been a rise of people seeking to swim in the open waters. I think the latest figure I read was 323%.
Yes, I read
extraordinary,
that.
but
Yeah.
so many of them are women, and they're older women. Yeah. So what does that say?
Well, I think there are a number of things. It's certainly very freeing as a woman to lose a sense of self-consciousness about your body and the weight of your body. You can feel weightless and part of your surroundings without an awareness of what you look like. Also, as you said, for women of a certain age who are always hot, there's nothing like getting freezing. It's really invigorating, and I think it's not a coincidence that when you see groups of people enjoying rushing into waves or jumping into rivers, they do tend to be women of a certain age, and women who women's groups of women enjoying the physical sensation without self-consciousness, I think, is really wonderful. And particularly, I suppose, around the world where in some countries women are made to cover up more than we are here and are made to maybe feel ashamed of their bodies. To be immersed in water is incredibly freeing, I'm sure, as it is for me.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. I found swimming to be incredibly liberating because your shape, size doesn't matter at all.
Absolutely.
And I think that, this interview hopefully will build that sense of confidence amongst women in particular, that yes, if I'm from a minority group in London and I'm not really using the facilities of open water swimming or in a pool, I may want to get into the water now that I've seen this inspirational interview with Anita Klein.
Fantastic.
But we also have, so many collectives. Women's collectives is a fantastic one in London. I hope that through this they can also make the connection between swimming and art in the way that you've done so beautifully. One of the themes for London Climate Action Week, of course, is the response of artists and the broader cultural community in particular to the climate emergency. Yeah. And last year, for example, we had a programme at the Tate. The Tate Modern has been a fantastic friend of this effort. And we interviewed Olafur Eliasson. Now, Olafur is, of course, he is a very purposeful artist when it comes to addressing climate change. Others do it in a much more inadvertent way. So I'd like to draw you out on some of the links between how you are expressing yourself with these themes and the passions that you have with regard to climate impacts, in particular for your grandchildren, the next generation.
My work is really completely non-political. I have my own political views, but they don't form part of my work because what I'm trying to express are such personal emotions. But having said that, what I always hope is that other people see themselves in my work. I don't want them to say that's a picture of Anita Klein. I want people to say that's me. And so I am looking always for the things that we share that are very deep in us, that are not about our opinions, but about our feelings. Of course, anything like joy in anything is fragile. Our lives are fragile. Our modern lives, which seem so comfortable and give us so much opportunity for joy, particularly without a pandemic, but even in a pandemic, there's always the tinge of, if not sadness, fragility. And I suppose that the thought of my grandchildren losing any of the joys that I've been able to have because their lives may be circumscribed by what we're doing to the planet is incredibly sad. The thing that I hope for with my pictures, the few that I can keep for myself ever, is that my grandchildren, great-grandchildren can enjoy them and can enjoy their lives and the things that I am trying to express joy in without the difficulties that they're going to be in their lives in 100 years' time if we don't take care of the planet.
And you talked earlier about how different it was working in London, because normally you would be working in your studio in Italy.
That's right.
And yet with lockdown in London and this much more restricted sense of self, you've experienced London in a very different way.
I have, yes, I have. I mean, I think that is interesting. There's so many things about lockdown that have made us reassess where we are, where we live, and maybe really see that the things I have seen that the things that maybe I go looking for far away are actually on my doorstep, and I didn't even realize it. And London has been really very beautiful during lockdown. Without being able to swim, I went on long walks through the city because I live in central London, and the air was fresh like the countryside, and the river sparkled, and the space to enjoy London and to see the beauty in it was maybe something that I wouldn't have had time for without lockdown. So yes, I have rediscovered home.
And as you said, we've seen a cleaner London.
We have.
Air pollution has gone down markedly.
Yeah.
And we've seen a greener London. And we want to keep it that way. So have you come to any resolutions, having experienced life very differently, about the next steps, the way forward out of recovery?
Okay, so I think we definitely have to try to get London to stay clean. I mean, I lived at the Barbican for 5 years and left because of developing an allergy to pollution. that area is incredibly polluted. You can smell it in the air all the time. And yet, as I said, walking past where I used to live during lockdown, it smelt like the countryside. I didn't have my sneezing allergy that I had when I lived there. We must all use public transport. We must stop London being so full of cars however we can. We must, I mean, I have my own personal ideas about that. I think definitely everybody who lives in London should have a little extra on their council tax that pays for free transport. If we all had a Londoner's Oyster card that we'd paid for annually, maybe people would feel that they wanted to use it. I think we need to have some kind of really big ideas about changing the way that we do things, so that we can have a clean London where everybody walks and cycles. Maybe would be lovely.
That's music to my ears. I think given the current controversy about the funding of Transport for London, that the idea of having a London Oyster card that we all pay for as Londoners, perhaps on a sliding scale, could be one of the ways of ensuring that this great city always has affordable public transport. And I hope that the mayor will be watching this.
Wouldn't that be nice?
The ministers will be watching this. So Anita, the theme of this exhibition is on water. And this is one of my favourite paintings. And when I see it, I see the beautiful open-faced gazes, and I see this octopus here. What's going on?
Okay, so this is a painting of me and my husband swimming in Lake Lucerne. It's another attempt to paint the feeling of what it's like to be in water. So I don't want to make things look like a photograph of somebody in water. What I want to try to express is what the actual physical feeling of it. And for me, this is about dissolving into the water. You know, when you swim in a lake, you can see a little bit of sometimes you can see your hands, sometimes you can't, depending on the type of water. But what you can see is also what you can feel, that you are becoming part of the water, that your body is dissolving into it. And yes, you know, the octopus woman is what I've become. But this is partly, I suppose it's partly a slightly fun look at the distortion that looking through water gives you, but also the feeling of dissolving into it, and also of the fact that it's constantly moving. So you're moving and the water's moving, and I'm really not interested in snapshots. I'm not interested in making pictures of a single moment. I want to make pictures of that are timeless, that are longer times than just a single moment, which is very difficult with water, because if you take a photograph of water, you get ripples, reflections, whatever, but you're somehow you're catching it and killing it because of making it still. And so what I'm trying to do, particularly in this painting, is allow the feeling of movement to be the whole experience rather than just a second of it.
That's very true, because the faces are still, but the rest is very dynamic. You know, it's very fluid. There's movement over here. So you've managed to capture that stillness that you feel in the water,
Absolutely.
And yet that you never step into the same river twice.
That's exactly it. And also that, I mean, this is me and my husband in the water. So I suppose that it's about the relationship as well. It's about a relationship between people as well as what it feels like to be in water and to share that.
There's another beautiful painting of yours, which is what I found so arresting when I walked past the gallery. And it's that image of the swimmer. And she's got her goggles on, and her face is emerging from the water. And the immediate connection with that painting is at a very emotional level. So I could just feel the sun on her skin, which I absolutely love. And as you said, it's not naturalistic, because
you never come
up like that. No. At most, you're just like turning your face
Absolutely.
To grab some air and then putting it back underwater. But it really speaks to what you're talking about, which is you're trying to convey the feeling of being in water.
Absolutely. And I think also there's another thing which is common to all of my paintings, not just the ones about water, which is the kind of sideways glance at the viewer. Yes, you never come out of the water and catch someone's eye. It just is not the way you swim. But I want the woman in the paintings who who is kind of me but not necessarily supposed to look like me, but is how I feel, to be connecting with the viewer and kind of sharing the moment. What I don't want is for the viewer to be distant from the woman in the painting. The woman in the painting is the viewer. So I really want the woman on that painting is looking out at the viewer and saying, you too, you know, you feel this too. And I'm so pleased that you had that response, that you felt a connection, because what I want to do is include the viewer with that glance. It's a kind of knowing, sharing, private joke kind of glance that I want to have between the woman in the picture and the viewer, which is there as well.
It's there, and I think
it's in most of them.
Yeah,
I think.
it's where you succeed. I mean, I've been an admirer of your work for so long.
Oh, thank you.
And the thing that's really drawn me to it is that you have figures who have this every woman quality that you were speaking about earlier. And the gaze is a very direct, open-faced, confident gaze. It invites you in. It's not coy.
Yeah, it's not coy, and I suppose that it is kind of, I don't want to sound too sexist about this, but it is kind of woman to woman. It's the kind of knowing, understanding, I am you sort of glance that women sometimes give each other in social situations. I'm not quite sure why, but it's very important to me that there is that feeling that the viewer is my friend, even though I don't know who she is. He is as well.
Anita, so many of your paintings are so autobiographical.
Yes.
You feature in them, your loved ones feature in them, and this one really speaks to me especially, because the theme of the campaign is Teach a Girl to Swim, and that's precisely what you're doing here. And I want this to be the mascot for our campaign.
Fantastic. Use it as a mascot. It's
tell us about it.
Okay, so it's dear to my heart as well, because this is my oldest granddaughter, Betty, and it was painted soon after the actual experience last summer of taking her to Brockwell Lido and trying to persuade her to jump into water that she could just stand up in. It was just at the shallow end, but she was very nervous about it. And of course, I promised her I would definitely catch her and it would all be fine. And, you know, we played a lot in the water, but she did eventually jump in. And there was a moment, sometimes I find that there are these peak moments in life where you can step outside of yourself and think, this is wonderful, just for a moment. And as she was jumping in, I felt this flood of how much she trusted me. The trust between a grandmother and a granddaughter, between lovely little Betty and me, and the fact that she was willing to throw herself into something that she was really frightened of because she knew I would look after her, it was just a moment that I knew that I really had to capture in a painting.
And that relationship comes out, that trust, that confidence, that, oh, Granny's going to catch me okay. It's absolutely beautiful.
Thank you.
And I think also for something like this, I mean, you mentioned Brockwell Lido. You know, Brockwell Lido is in Brixton. It's where my triathlon club, Windrush, is based. I think these kind of representations in artwork of the joy of swimming, the joy of swimming with loved ones, is something that we'd like to really promote more through our campaign. And I hope that with this interview, we're going to be inviting whole different sets of communities to come and see your work, admire it, purchase it, and be introduced to the joy of swimming and the joy of art.
I hope so, and the joy of being a grandma.
Someday. So thank you so much, Anita. It was a pleasure talking to you.
That's a pleasure.